What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
Well, to be honest, I am feeling a little under the weather here. Got a little cold coming on today. So if there were a time of the week that I would want that to happen, it would be later in the week because a lot of work goes down early in the week, a lot of morning to nights. Later in the week, like Friday, Saturday, that's when you can, as a fantasy analyst, pull your foot off the gas maybe a little bit. So it's the right time for it to happen. But I mean, nothing going on with me other than that and a ton of work, Harmon. And I realized, too, you always ask me at the top of shows how I'm doing. How are you doing, man? I never throw it back to you.
Oh, who cares? I'm fine. You know what? I'm here, and I'm here to talk ball. That's what matters. Everything else it doesn't matter, okay? For the next 90 minutes, right, on this here live show / podcast, all that matters is I'm here, and I'm feeling good because we get to talk a little football, Boone. And I'm hoping you can at least last 90 minutes. Hopefully you're feeling better by Sunday when we get you in the Boone bunker to do all of your rankings, because you're crushing it this year, buddy. Shout out to you. You're back in the rankings contest. You're back to dominating. What else is new? Boone is absolutely electric, which is why, by the way,
don't put that all on me. Don't put that all on me.
No.
There's a guy who's 5 spots behind me in that
matter.
contest, and his name is Matt Harmon, and he also happens to be the number one wide receiver ranker right now. So, hey, how's that for the reception perception brand? The number one receiver ranker is Matt Harmon this year so far.
The haters are furious, and from week 6 on, I'm probably absolutely tank the whole thing. So that's just usually how it goes. Let's get into the business at hand here. It's the Week 6 preview show. If you're new with us here, we welcome you and thank you for joining us here in Week 6. Your fantasy season must be either in shambles or you're just riding high. And you're like, let's see what these bozos are talking about over here. First 2 segments of the show, this is Boone's 6-pack of questions where he gives us big questions, big themes for each week's slate of games. Then segment number 3 is literally no one's games of the week, where I pick 3 games that are not headlines by any means, but you need to care about these lovable freak shows from a fantasy football perspective. And then segment 4 is the hurry up offense, rapid fire questions before we get out of here. Let's do it. Let's dive into the first segment. Let's dive into Boone's 6-pack of questions. Something about that little pop here on the preview show just makes me feel alive, makes me feel good for a slate of games. All right, Boone, give us your first question here heading into week 6.
Is this the last chance to buy low on the Bears offense? And this is an offense that we have talked about a lot, ad nauseum maybe, right? Going back to the offseason, yes. All the moves that they made, bringing in Ben Johnson, bringing in offensive linemen, the draft, everything that they have done pointed towards this offense being much better this season. But we also pointed out that it might take a little bit of time. And in the first month, we saw some flashes. We saw some really big games. We also saw some, tough performances in the first couple weeks, but they went against the Vikings and the Lions in those games. So I think we can give them a bit of a pass there. But the team's 2-2, and now they're coming off a bye. And just to set the stage a little from a fantasy perspective, like Caleb Williams right now, QB6 in fantasy points per game. DeAndre Swift, RB27. Rome Odunze, our guy, wide receiver 4 on the year, getting it done as a top 12 receiver. I think that's going to continue. DJ Moore way down at wide receiver 46. Not looking great for him at the moment. We'll see. I know you've speculated maybe he could be a trade candidate at some point, which might open the door for some of these rookies. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But now that they're coming off the bye, now that they've had this chance to self-assess, to try to correct some things on the fly here, to make those necessary adjustments, are they going to come back and take a step forward? And I think one of the biggest reasons that they definitely are is the schedule coming up here is incredible. They get the Commanders this week, and then after this week, the Saints, the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Giants. Those are the next 5 weeks for them here. So they're about to go on a run here, Harmon. I think this is going to be a very important offense for fantasy, and I think people should be buying in before this Washington game because the Commanders, this is a positive matchup for basically everybody in the passing attack. They're giving up the 8th most passing yards on the season. Washington also top 13 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends. And it could be even worse for Washington because if you actually look at their performances, right, like that first game, they did pretty well. It was against Russell Wilson. The most recent game, they did pretty well. That was against Justin Herbert and that absolutely decimated Chargers offensive line. The other games, they got absolutely lit up. And it wasn't necessarily by like superstar quarterbacks. It was Jordan Love and Geno Smith and Michael Penix. So I think Caleb is going to have a lot of success in this game. And then I know we're going to have to wait until Monday night for it, but I think all these guys in this offense are going to hit the ground running coming out of the bye. This is a game with a very high projected point total at 49.5, one of the highest ones of the week. There is going to be some fireworks here, Harmon. So, Rome Odunze, like we said, I think you look at him as a top 5, top 6 receiver this week. I think Caleb is right up there as a mid to high end QB1. DJ Moore, I think you could play as a wide receiver 3 flex. And then we're going to have to see what's in store for these rookies. And we can talk more about that as we go here, but they factor into kind of all of these skill positions where could these guys get a little more work and how is that going to change things moving forward for this offense?
Man, you've got me really excited about this upcoming schedule here. Commanders, Saints, and Ravens are the one that you would have thought, hey, that might be a tough matchup. Not so much anymore. That is maybe the most positive matchup of the group, Bengals aside. But yeah, Commanders here are interesting. Obviously, last week, I said a lot of this stuff going into last week's game because, you expected sort of the Chargers to be able to put things together. But as you mentioned, the offensive line, which I know we'll discuss here shortly. But man, I think that when you look at the way the Commanders have struggled, is a particularly bad matchup with this Bears offense. When you look at like points per drop back allowed, according to Fantasy Points data, the Commanders, when they're in zone coverage, give up the 3rd highest points per drop back in zone coverage. By the way, the team that's the 2nd highest points per drop back allowed in zone coverage, the Chicago Bears. So we could see a pretty spicy, actually back and forth game on Monday night between these 2 second-year quarterbacks. But the other areas where they've struggled too, and this is more like qualitative than quantitative, I think because they want to be a man coverage heavy team, but because some of the corners have had issues, namely like Marshawn Lattimore, they've had to go to a lot more zone stuff, but they're not adept to do that. So the communication has been problematic. So against these teams, like you mentioned, Green Bay, that do a lot of pre-snap motion at the snap, they've really struggled with the communication and passing that off. That's obviously what Chicago does a lot of with Ben Johnson. So I expect those matchups to be pretty advantageous for the Chicago Bears. And secondly, we have 4 teams coming off a bye this week. The Falcons, the Bears, who we're talking about, the Packers, and the Steelers. And that's something that's going to come up throughout the course of the show is just what do these teams look like? Because typically when they get to the bye, like you said, they can self-scout, they can trim some fat off. And that's kind of been what this Bears staff has talked about in training camp. They put a lot on Caleb Williams at the start, and then they began to dial back. Are they going to really be dialing back even further and simplifying what he does well and what he doesn't do well? I'm really, based on those 2 factors, the matchup and just what I think this offense can look like coming out of a bye. We'll talk about like the players that could be involved, but from an outlook perspective, I'm pretty excited about this matchup on Monday night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder how much do the rookies actually start to factor in? Because you said it, like the slow rollout with some of these guys, right? Whether it's Colson Loveland at tight end, who seemed like he was coming on a little bit. Like in week 4, he had 3 targets early in that game. He had 1 big catch for 33 yards. Then he got hurt, only played 10% of the snaps, but that might have potentially been a breakout game for him. Then he doesn't play. Then he's been out. So now we're going to see if he can come back healthy this week. Can he play? Does he take on a bigger role? Cole Kmet's not the answer at tight end for them. So Loveland, a very good pass catcher, somebody that came with high draft capital. They're going to want to work him in. It's just a question of how fast does that happen. Luther Burden, we also saw, the snaps didn't go up in a big way, but we saw him start to get some opportunities. He had that 100-yard game. So can he also start to work in a little more? And from the way the coaching staff is talking, this is what they want. They're saying that they want to start to work these guys in. So we're not just making this up out of thin air. They're coming out and saying that they want these guys involved. And then in the backfield too, right? Like DeAndre Swift has not really done anything to like secure that number 1 back job. And yet Kyle Monangai hasn't really done that much to take it away from him either. But Kyle Monangai is a day 3 rookie. So is the early season experience going to be good for him? And can he start to carve out more of a role as we go here? I think these are all guys that you should be grabbing. You can get them off the waiver wire. There's really no risk involved. You don't put them in your lineup this week. You just grab them and stash them. And this can be a really cheap way to get yourself invested in this offense where if things start taking off, then hey, you have these guys on your bench. And if they start to take on these bigger roles as the season continues, you have a piece of this offense that, like I said, we've always kind of identified it as an offense that was going to be meaningful for fantasy. And now I think we're really hitting this stretch where that could become a reality. So this is the cheapest way to do it. You're not going to be able to trade for Rome Odunze. You're probably not going to be able to get Caleb off of anybody, depending who their other quarterback is. So this is one spot where you could invest in this offense. I think you should do it.
I like it. I like that call. Just, hey, if you have space on your bench, pick up a Luther Burden and just park him on your bench and see what happens. Now, if he comes back and he's still a, 24, 28%, somewhere in between there, which is kind of where he's hovered, he's still like that route participation type player. He's probably just going to end up dropping him, and maybe you come back to regret that in like week 10 whenever he does get the promotion, but it is what it is. It's fine. It's just a stash. But I am interested to see Luther Burden because he's flashed a little bit. Obviously, we know he had that long reception on the flea flicker. He's not done anything like that consistently, of course. That being said, Olamide Zaccheaus has 10 targets, 8 catches in the 2 games before the bye. So does DJ Moore. I think Luther Burden can mix into either of those 2 roles, the slot-based role that Zaccheaus has, or the kind of flanker role, which is what DJ Moore plays. Rome and DJ obviously alternate a little bit there. Rome also goes into the slot as well. Rome is the wide receiver 1 here. So I think he could mix into either spots. But Colson Loveland, though, is really interesting because, man, Cole Kmet, who leads all tight ends in snap rate right now, he's played on 93% of the Bears' snaps. He was terrible in the game before the bye, like blocking, receiving, multiple mistakes. And this is the guy, Colson Loveland, they took 10th overall. They want to see what Colson Loveland can do. They want to use him in ways that make him like a Sam Laporta type mismatch. Don't take my word for it. Like you said, Ben Johnson said that to him on the phone call for when they drafted Colson Loveland. So he's definitely the guy I'm really excited about. So love the schedule. Love them coming off the bye. Let's kind of continue this post-bye rookie bump theme with your second question here.
Well, one thing I will say, and it does kind of segue into what we're about to talk about here. You always know me suggesting these little moves you could do, these little edges you could get. The Bears play on Monday night, and we know on Yahoo, you can drop your bench players after they've played. So after the Sunday games, if you have someone on your bench that you don't need to keep any longer, on Monday, before those games kick off, then you can go drop that guy off your bench, pick up some of these rookies on the Bears, and then you can see what they do in that game and beyond. So that's just one kind of extra little edge you could get there. But I think the rookies, whether it's coming off bye weeks or just whether it's we're getting further into the season, they're getting more experience. The coaching staff's getting to know them better and getting to know the ways that they can win out there. We're going to see some more guys come on. And we've talked about a bunch of rookies this season, right? And we've focused a lot on the top guys, on the Ashton Genties and the Omarion Hamptons and Tedero McMillan, who we will talk about shortly. But I think there's a lot of other rookies that we need to spend more time discussing here. And it's not just the Bears guys, and it's not just as deep as the Bears guys, though I do have a couple deeper names that I want to mention. The first guy that I think everybody should be talking so much about is Quinshon Judkins on the Browns. And I get it. He wasn't there the first week. There was the off-field stuff. But after he signed with the team, after he joins in week 2, this guy has been unbelievable for fantasy. And I wonder if it's because he's on the Browns that people are still kind of discounting him and not looking at him as much and not talking about him as much. But he's been unbelievable. At least 70 scrimmage yards in all 4 of his games so far. And that includes that debut when he only played 27% of the snaps, right? The 3 most recent outings, he's operated as the clear lead back. I think he looks like one of the better backs in the NFL already. 95 scrimmage yards in one game, 115 yards in another, 128 yards in another. He has 2 touchdowns during that stretch. And he's managed to do it against a tougher part of the schedule. The Packers, the Lions, the Vikings. Like, he's coming through in spots where you were looking at him going, okay, that's a difficult matchup. We got to downgrade him a little bit there. And no, he still goes out. And part of it is because they have to build it around the run game. And even when they fall behind, they got to keep running the ball. They don't really turn to the air completely, but still, he looks so good out there. What happens when the schedule starts to get a little bit easier, which it is going to here? I just think that everyone should acknowledge that this guy is a borderline fantasy RB1 the rest of the year. This guy's in the mix as a top 12 running back for fantasy. And I don't think everyone is looking at him that way. So if people are still valuing as a top 20 guy, as an RB2, you go out and get him at all costs. This guy is going to be an impact fantasy player the rest of the season, even though he is on the Browns. He has already shown us, Harmon, we discussed it in the summer. When we see the rookies on the field, the first thing you want to figure out is, do they belong, or are they going to be somebody that's going to take a little bit of time to get acclimated to the pros, or are they someone that maybe doesn't even belong in the league and we'll see him in the CFL at some point, right? Well, Judkins hits the ground running, no pun intended, and immediately looks like a star. And I don't think everyone is acknowledging that fact. And I think in some leagues, I have been able to still get him at a reduced price. I just don't think people are realizing how valuable this guy could be.
I mean, he's been the best rookie running back this year so far, right?
Hands down.
Yeah. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, sure. But I just think from like eye test efficiency wise, he's been, and that doesn't mean he's going to be the best forever, right? But I think that he's been the best so far. Here are your top 5 players in terms of rushing yards over expected in terms of next gen stats. Number 1 is Javonte Williams. Just like we all predicted. Number 2, David Montgomery. Number 3, Quinshon Judkins. Number 4, J.K. Dobbins. Number 5, Bill Krosky-Merritt. So 2 rookies in the top 5 there. Quinshon Judkins has been not just getting what's blocked, he's been getting extra onto his runs. He has 8 runs of 10 plus yards. He has 12 runs of 15 plus miles per hour according to next gen stats. So like there's been 4.3 yards after contact per attempt. Like he's getting more than just what is there, which is good because I do have some concerns about this Browns offensive line in the long term, especially at the left tackle position. But Dylan Gabriel being at the quarterback position definitely is an upgrade on what we're going to get from Joe Flacco, the pocket sloth at this point. And I maintain that this Steelers defense, which is who they're playing this week, is not good. I still think there's some issues from a speed perspective. And Quinshon Judkins with that size and speed, this is definitely a matchup where I think he'll be good. And yeah, he's played really good football. There's no question. I did not see it coming after spending 0 time with the team in training camp because of the domestic violence incident. And not signing a contract, I did not see that coming. But man, he has been great when he's been on the field. That's for sure.
Yeah, to show up on 2 days of practice and immediately start producing, it's been really impressive from him. I talked a lot about that one because I was fired up about that one. We got some other guys that will go a little further down here in terms of rookies who I think are going to start to have even bigger days moving forward. Matthew Golden on the Packers. I'm curious to see your thoughts on him here. I know it was a slow start to the season. He was playing around 50% of the snaps the first 2 weeks, 2 catches, 2 carries, not much production in those games. But his last 2 outings, 4 catches for 52 yards. He had 3 carries for 9 yards in week 4 as well. And then 5 for 58 and a 5-yard carry on top of it. He's another guy who's coming off a bye here, with 60 yards in back-to-back contests. Is this a spot where he is going to start to get more usage in this offense? And I know it's the Packers, and they like to spread the ball around, and we talk about that all the time. But this is also a guy that they took in the first round. We said it with Colston Loveland, right? Like these teams that invested in these players, they had a plan for them. And if they could start to come through, which it looks like Golden is, at least on paper in terms of his production, it's starting to ramp up here. His usage is starting to ramp up. Let's see what he can become coming off the bye here. And I mean, you're going against a great matchup in the Bengals, right? They've given up at least 55 yards and or a touchdown to 5 different receivers in just the last 2 games, Harmon. Like the golden breakout is coming. I think this might be the week that it actually hits. And he's not going to be a superstar. I'm not suggesting that this guy is going to end up being a top 10 fantasy receiver or anything like that. But he is someone that is going to provide a lot of value based on the way people are looking at him right now. A solid wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 3 with some fantasy upside as well in an offense that needs somebody to step up. Like Romeo Doubs had a big game against the Cowboys, but like someone else in this passing attack needs to step up. It can't just be Tucker Kraft. They don't have that number 1 receiver. Could Golden be that guy, Harmon?
God, I don't know, man. They just rotate these receivers so much, and Christian Watson is back at practice this week. I mean, is he going to play in this game? Yeah, Xavier Williams gets time. Dontavian Wicks gets time. Romeo Doubs is kind of the entrenched guy as the X. I'm hoping what we do see from Golden, even if he doesn't get a route participation bump, which I'm skeptical that he'll be like 75% of the routes. I'm skeptical of that just because they do rotate these receivers. What I'm hoping to see is that he's getting some more layup routes because his route tree is truly just all downfield stuff prior to the bye. So maybe they take this time because Jaden Reed's on IR. We don't know when Jaden Reed's going to be back. If he does come back, it will be late. It's going to be a while. It's going to be late in the season. We're in week 6. It's going to be a while till we see him. But if we is Matthew Golden used in some of those more Jaden Reed ways, closer to the line of scrimmage, getting him on sweeps, getting him on motion plays, that I think would be encouraging because otherwise if he's in this kind of part-time role and he's only getting downfield stuff, that's like an even less predictable Jameson Williams type player on a run-heavy offense, and I think that would just be discouraging. So I was kind of mixed, but mostly positive on Golden as a prospect, and I liked him as a pick in redraft this year. I've just gotten a little bit more bearish on the fantasy usage for this year because my thought was, they used a first-round pick on him. How are they still going to use him in a rotation? Well, guess what they've done? They've still used him in a rotation.
It's early. It is still very, very early. And I see behind the scenes, they are pointing out here that last week we called the Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt breakout game. So, hey, I think this could be a similar thing where we see Golden just go off in this game. And even, again, this is the point I'm trying to make, that it might not be consistent. We're not talking about a guy that's going to put up 100 yards every single week, but let's see him have that big game in a good matchup. And then at least we can look forward to that when those matchups come for the Packers down the road here. We'll move on. We'll talk about some other.
I'm glad. Just real quick. I'm glad you said that because the Bill Krosky-Merritt point that we discussed last week is instructive. We framed this last week as, hey, this run game is awesome. It's one of the most efficient run games in the league. The problem is the snaps are split 3 ways. But our theory was, what if they just see enough from Bill and they say, hey, we're just going to give that guy more work. And that is exactly what happened. So there is certainly, I'm probably being a little bit too close-minded, which let's all acknowledge that I've got some scars with the Packers wide receivers and this rotation. So let's all admit our biases here. And by all of us, I do mean me. Now that that's been admitted, we can say that, yes, there's the chance I'm being a little bit too hard-nosed about this and rigid in the idea that Matthew Golden's going to come out and have the same exact usage he always had. It's very possible this is a situation that we just see something different. So Boone, I'm glad we got that out there before we move on to these other guys.
Also nice to see on the JCM topic, nice to see the coaching staff out there working with him, working on route running. Like, they want to develop this guy into a true lead back in the offense.
He's good.
And they're doing it the right way. So if you have JCM, be very, very excited there. I think if you have Mason Taylor on the Jets, I think people need to be way more excited about this guy too. And we talked about it on Monday's show, going over the waiver wire pickups for the week. I guess, Harmon, I didn't make it clear enough. I guess I didn't make a strong enough case in the waiver wire column because he is still available in 67% of leagues. Folks, this is a top 12 fantasy tight end the rest of the season. I know it's the Jets passing attack, and you figure, okay, they can only support Garrett Wilson. Not true. Mason Taylor is emerging as the number 2 pass catcher in that offense. 13 targets in his last 2 games, 5 for 65 in week 4, 9 for 67 on 12 targets in week 5. And this week, when Garrett Wilson has to go up against Pat Surtain and the Broncos, who are they going to turn to? There is not a second receiver out there that they are going to be able to lean on. The second receiver is Mason Taylor. I think this is going to continue. Another guy that had fairly high draft capital, not first round, but a day 2 pick, somebody that they saw a role for, and he's already taking it over. And I think it would have happened maybe even sooner, but he had an injury in the preseason that kind of slowed his development, that delayed his launch a little bit. But certainly I think somebody that you could pick up, and there's a lot of players out there that you might be able to drop at tight end or potentially trade away if you can get some value for them, and just start Mason Taylor the rest of the way. I think this guy is somebody that should be in starting lineups, not on waiver wires, and yet he's on waiver wires in the majority of leagues, Harmon.
Love the playing time here the last 2 weeks. As we've talked about with tight ends, we're trying to find the number 2 target on the team. We're trying to find somebody that's on the field over 80% of the snaps. So far, the last 2 weeks, Mason Taylor has blown away 81.5% of the snaps and to run a route on 81% of the dropbacks. So and that's number 2. Both of those things, number 2 behind Garrett Wilson, as you mentioned, 19 targets, which is actually one ahead of Garrett Wilson over the last 2 weeks, 14 receptions. Now, he definitely might be a little bit of a catch and fall type, but that's fine. That's okay. We're talking about a lot of receptions here. I have Travis Kelce actually on a full point PPR roster, and I still spent a significant amount of fab, maybe too much, honestly. I was one of those where I looked at what everybody else spent. I was like, oh, did I overdo this one? Spent a little bit too much of fab to get Mason Taylor just because I do think there's a high ceiling here. Maybe I can use one of these guys as a trade chip because people don't have tight ends. I don't know. Again, maybe overthinking it, but I just saw Mason Taylor on the waiver wire. I like everything you said. I agree with you. I think he's a top 12 tight end rest of the way. When we're looking for, the next kind of Tucker Kraft type at tight end, an under the radar type guy who can be on the field all the time, it's guys like Mason Taylor at 6'5", 250. It's guys like A.J. Barner at 6'6", 250. Barner's definitely a deeper name. Doesn't necessarily have the same target upside as Mason Taylor. But nevertheless, I do think also fits into this bucket too. So I'm with you on the Mason Taylor thing. Very interested to see the matchup here for him this week. We've got 2 more names for the rookies here to rip off here.
Yeah, we could probably go a little quicker through these. These are deeper ones, so these are complete stashes or if you're in really, really deep leagues. But Gunnar Helm on the Titans, he's been their number 2 tight end this year. Will he continue to be the number 2 tight end, Harmon? I think there's a chance that he's not just the number 2 for much longer because the coaching staff absolutely loves this guy. They've talked about how good things always happen when the ball gets in his hands, when they throw it his way. And they have said this is another situation where they have said they are going to get him more opportunities, that he is going to get more targets moving forward. And he's gone from playing around a third of the snaps a few weeks ago to playing a season high 66% of the snaps in week 5. And he turned that into season highs with 5 targets, 4 catches, 34 yards. And I know that's not super impressive. That's why you're not putting him in your fantasy lineup just yet. But things are trending in the right direction for him. When you have the OC, there it is right there, just outright talking about how good he is and how they need to get him more work. That's great. Chig Okonkwo was still involved last week. I don't want to suggest that he is completely past him, but week 5 was the first time that he played fewer snaps than Helm. So could that be the writing on the wall that it's going in that direction? I don't think it's impossible that we could see that trend continue. So I think Helm is somebody you could stash in deeper formats. So is Brashard Smith on the Chiefs. We're switching to running back after talking about tight end a little bit there, but Brashard Smith is a name that certainly has been circulated. I know we had ESPN's Dan Graziano talk about him as somebody that could get more work moving forward a week or 2 ago. And I think that needs to happen. Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt. Isaiah Pacheco is somebody who has been in Coping Corner longer than anyone this season. Doesn't seem like he's coming out.
Yeah.
Pacheco and Hunt are just boring. They're going to get you what's blocked, I guess. There's nothing really exciting coming from them. They'll fall into the end zone when they get those opportunities, but they need somebody else in this backfield to give them a little bit of juice. And Brashard Smith can do that. And he's not somebody that's going to come in and take over like a JCM. He's not going to be a lead back necessarily, but think about the Jerick McKinnon role in that offense back in the day, right? Could he come in and be that kind of pass catcher, that guy that's explosive and dynamic? He could certainly fill that role in the last couple of weeks. He's got 3 catches in each of the last 2 games here. So this is somebody that I think it makes a lot of sense for the Chiefs in real life to get him into this offense and get him involved. And for fantasy, you want to be ahead of the curve on that. So you go stash him and you see just how big of a role he can carve out in that backfield.
Yeah, 100%. This is just one where the Jerick McKinnon comparison is right. That's probably the ceiling of what we're looking at here, which is, more of a flex play, somebody that's a bye week fill-in type. I'm with you that I don't know if I see him taking over the backfield, but he does have to see one of these veterans completely removed. And I just don't know that Kareem Hunt's going anywhere because he plunges in 2 touchdowns on Monday night. He has the 33-yard run, which, by the way, is his longest run since 2021 or whatever. So yeah, I do think that. Yeah, I mean, we've got a quote up here from the Chiefs special teams coordinator, Dave Tobe, that's where Brashard Smith is trying to make his hay right now. So definitely someone I'm interested to see how he gets integrated in the offense. a little bit skeptical that he's like a routine fantasy back at any point this season. But let's get to your third question here, and we're sticking on the. Actually, before we get to your third question, let's throw up the YouTube poll results that we threw out here on rookie running backs. Who would you rather have in Dynasty? Quinshon Judkins, Ashton Genty. 52% of the YouTube chat, which is the best and brightest, by the way. The best and the brightest in terms of the fantasy space is in our YouTube chat. There's a lot of bozos out there, not on our YouTube chat. That's where these are the real folks who know ball, and they say 52% of them want Quinshon Judkins in Dynasty over Ashton Genty. So we'll see how that take ages, but that is a testament to how well Quinshon has been playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's close at this point. Like, he has been so good and he's continuing. It's not just been one or two games. He's outproduced them so far this year. I like the fact that Genty's getting more work in the passing game now. That's going to help save his value this season for the rest of the year while the Raiders aren't that great. But yeah, it's interesting that it is that close. I would not have guessed that Judkins would have won that poll.
Yeah, pretty spicy stuff. All right, let's get to your third question here, which, again, we're going to stick on the rookie theme.
Is this the Teteroa McMillan week? Is this the week that he finally has the huge game and that he goes nuclear? And I don't know why, like, on the panic meter shows, there's been people asking about him, and I've been so surprised when that's happened because he's been good. Like, I know he hasn't. Well, go ahead. Well, what is it, Harmon?
I know why. Because me, you, a lot of fantasy analysts, I think, have been saying for like 3 weeks now, this is the Teteroa McMillan week. I know I said it when the Falcons game was coming up, which obviously that didn't go that way. Dolphins game didn't happen. Now we're saying it again here. I would bet that is why, Boone, because people keep saying it's going to happen, and then it's another kind of 60-yard-ish performance, which not the worst thing in the world, but we're talking about this is the week, and then it doesn't happen. So now you're here to say, though, this is actually the week.
Well, my logic on it, I think the reason that people are talking that way is just because he hasn't found the end zone yet. Because if he gets a touchdown in one of those games, that's the bigger week that people are looking for. Because, yeah, he's been good. He's averaging 5 catches for 70 yards and almost 9 targets per game. And that's his first 5 NFL games. Like, those are fantastic numbers. You get those kind of numbers from a receiver as a rookie. That's great. And it's only going to get better as we go here. And the touchdowns will come. When you're getting that kind of volume, the touchdowns are going to show up. There's no doubt about it. And this week against the Cowboys, yes, this is the time. It is going to happen. Much to the chagrin of producer Colin. He does not want to hear this, but Dallas allowing the most fantasy points to receivers this year. They're just hemorrhaging yards and touchdowns through the air. I mean, you could look at some of the number one receivers that have gone against them this year. Garrett Wilson, 71 and a touchdown. Romeo Doubs, the one we mentioned earlier, 58 and 3 TDs. Rome Odunze, 62 and a touchdown. Malik Neighbors, 167 and 2 touchdowns. And yeah, that one was an overtime game, but still, we could take a bit away from him there and he still would have had a big game. So McMillan, I do think this is the game where he is going to go over 100 yards. He is going to score a touchdown. It is all going to start to come together, and fantasy managers will finally be satisfied, Harmon, because he will get in the end zone.
This is a little bit small sample stuff, so I'm not 100% sure if I buy into this, but I do kind of think so far the film backs this up as well. Teteroa McMillan against man coverage right now, 4.32 yards per route run. Against zone coverage, 1.41. Now, nobody on the Panthers has been good against zone coverage because I think Bryce Young has made a lot of mistakes throwing into zone coverage, so it's not necessarily just a McMillan thing. But this is one of the most zone-heavy teams in the NFL. It's a big part of the reason why Garrett Wilson and Justin Fields took forever to get going in this game, because Justin Fields is not he's great against man coverage, not so good against zone coverage. So just a minor matchup thing to note, that if this is not this is the week, doesn't turn out to be this is the week, that might be one of the reasons why. But I am with you that Teteroa McMillan is once again in a good spot here. I think, it's easy to blame Bryce, but I think he's put a couple balls on the ground. He's a rookie receiver. He's still figuring things out. He's not been Emeka Egbuka, who's just hit the ground running. Thank God we talked about him literally every podcast, Boone. I'm glad that aged well. But McMillan is still figuring things out a little bit, especially some of the intricacies against zone coverage. So it could be the week any week. And I do think if you're looking at previous matchups, that does make sense. But I just kind of wanted to throw that little devil's advocate out about the zone coverage, man coverage splits right now.
Yeah, a couple other things I want to mention with the Panthers here, too. If he doesn't find the end zone, one reason might be because Rico Dowdle steals all the touchdowns from him, because Rico Dowdle coming off that 200-yard game. Chuba Hubbard not practicing yet this week. Looks like he's probably going to miss this game. And Dowdle with the revenge game, another one of these revenge games, Harmon, with the revenge game against the Cowboys, which is a great matchup for him here. I mean, we've just seen, Breece Hall hit him up for 158 scrimmage yards. Josh Jacobs, 157 and 2 touchdowns. They're allowing the 6th most fantasy points. Like, this is a great matchup for him. And then the other thing that I want to mention here too, Jalen Coker. There's a chance that Jalen Coker could play in this game. They've opened up his 21-day window. He's practiced in full the first 2 days this week. I don't know if they're going to rush him back right away, but if he gets back out there, that could also potentially open things up.
What is this from? What is this from?
McMillan. This is fantastic.
I mean, if you're not watching this on YouTube right now, I can't even possibly explain to this. But
yeah,
please, producers, let me know if this is a creation that you guys have done, because this is fantastic. It's the meme of Bugs Bunny where he says, "Lord forgive me, but it's time to go back to the old me." And it's Jalen Coker and a Panthers jersey. Yeah, shout out to producer Jason Jung. I can't believe this is the best surprise I've gotten in years. Is this seeing this live? I guess he made this, so shout out to Jung on that one. But yeah, again, if you're not watching it on YouTube, it's worth go check it out. Yahoo Fantasy YouTube channel to check this one out. But sorry, Boone, please continue.
I mean, I don't need to make the case about Jalen Coker to you. I could talk about him to everyone else, but we've mentioned him here for a few weeks as somebody that you could stash, you could throw in your IR spot. And now the time is kind of running out to grab him, because he is going to get back on the field soon. If it's not this week, then I would imagine it's the week after. And once he's back out there, I think there's a chance that he becomes that number 2 option in the passing game here. That you look back at his numbers last year, like, you take away the first game because he only played 10% of the snaps. After that, you take his numbers from the rest of the games he played, you put him on pace for a full 17-game season, which isn't always predictive, but yet it still tells us something about the guy. And he was on pace for over 800 yards in 2024 if you take out that first game where he barely played. So this is a player with a lot of talent. I know you like him. This is a team that needs that second option. Not only do I think he could potentially become a fantasy starter in that kind of wide receiver 3 flex range, but I think he could help this whole team. Maybe gets Bryce going, maybe helps take some attention away from McMillan. It's a much needed piece that they just haven't had because he's been hurt this year.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about a team that struggled throwing against zone coverage, having a power slot receiver like a Jalen Coker would be critical there. I mean, Hunter Renfrow just hasn't gotten it done so far this year. 0.51 yards per out run against zone coverage for Hunter Renfrow, the primary slot receiver on this team. Not great. Second most routes on the team against zone coverage. Obviously, Xavier Legette hasn't gotten it done. McMillan is a rookie, still figuring it out. So, yeah, the reason it won't be the week for Tedero McMillan is he's about to get his job taken as the number 1 receiver by Jalen Coker. I'm kidding. I already allowed myself to get needlessly excited yesterday on the show for Coker's return. So I don't think we need to do any more of that. But, yeah, I'm really interested to see what he can bring to this team, of course, because he is a young receiver that I like. All right, we are going to go to a break here so that I can just look at that Bugs Bunny meme 10 more times during our break here. When we come back, we have more questions about the Week 6 slate from our guy, Justin Boone. We will get into those right after this. All right, we are back. We are still recovering from things that were said during the commercial break, but we'll keep it moving because we're professionals. Actually, our discussion about the Chargers backfield, which we will not repeat here on air, but we are going to have a professional conversation about that because that is your 4th question here heading into Week 6.
Can we trust this banged up Chargers offense in what should be a very good matchup against the Dolphins for them, right? And for all the excitement that we had in the first few weeks about the Chargers and the way they were throwing the ball all around the yard and how good Justin Herbert looked, and all of a sudden Marion Hampton starts coming on, the injuries have just completely unraveled this unit, right? Rashawn Slater was out for the year. We knew that a long time ago. Joe Alt with the high ankle sprain, he's already missed one game. Looks like he's going to miss at least one more. Trey Pipkins, he hasn't been good, and now he's got a knee injury, and he's not practicing, so could be another man down there. Mekhi Becton, he's got a hand injury. He's practicing in limited fashion, but he's wearing a non-contact jersey, so we don't know if he's going to be able to play. And that's just the offensive line. We're also down Hampton, who's on IR, and Najee Harris, who's out for the season. And on defense, they got guys out. Khalil Mack and other guys are out as well. And it seems like this has happened to the Chargers so many times in my life where on paper they look great and they start a season so strong and then injuries just destroy them along the way. And it kind of is happening again here, Harmon. Like, I would be so excited about this team going up against the Dolphins, like the Dolphins who are giving up yards to everybody, giving up tons of fantasy points. And yet, I don't know with all these injuries that we can trust that the Chargers are going to be able to come through. And, you know, we talked about the backfield on Monday and we talked about the backfield during the commercial break. And, you know, they're both waiver wire pickups in terms of Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins. But I will be honest, and I put this out on Twitter as well, that I don't have a strong feeling of which way this is going to go. And I think I expressed that on Monday, right? Like that we weren't going to bid huge amounts to get these guys off the waiver wire, that I could see this going in any direction, that if you're looking for pure upside, Kamani Vidal, he profiles as that more dynamic option. He's got more juice. He has the highest ceiling if he emerges as the lead back here. But I don't know that we can really have faith that he's going to necessarily come out on top, because Hassan Haskins seems like a coach favorite, seems like that guy who's just going to, you know, be the grinder, who's going to get the yards that are blocked for him. You know, Harbaugh has that connection going back to college with him. And do you really trust the guy that gets the yards that are blocked for him behind an offensive line that's just been destroyed by injuries? I don't know that I want to trust in that guy for my fantasy lineup unless you absolutely have to, which in one league I am going to start Haskins, and that's because injuries have crushed me. I thought that drafting James Conner and Trey Benson would be great, Harmon, and yet both of those guys are gone now. So Hassan Haskins it is. But this just has the makings of a very frustrating fantasy situation, because on top of Kamani Vidal, on top of Haskins, they're probably going to have Nyheim Hines out there as well, who can factor into the passing game. He's signed to the practice squad. So it renders Vidal and Haskins these very risky, like RB3 flex options. I wouldn't get into the Nyheim Hines business. I don't think you need to even pick him up, but maybe that'll be the guy that I'm cursing this week, and he's going to go out and have a huge game. I've mostly done that with the primetime games and with tight ends, but maybe I'm branching out a little further now, Harmon. But I think like the ceiling overall has to be lower. And we've seen it, right? Like they've lost games recently that you think that they would have won. And yet, going into a game against the Dolphins that seemed like a team that is absolutely primed to have one of those games where they just give it all up and their coach gets fired after. I don't know that the Chargers is going to be the team to do that because of all these injuries.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I love this quote that we got from offense coordinator Greg Roman on Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal. They're going to be the lead dogs this week. It's like, well, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, okay, well, now what? I think that Hassan Haskins is the favorite for the early down banger work. And this Dolphins team only has 9 tackles for loss in the running game this year, which is a bottom 5 number. I mean, they definitely, it can be done, but we just saw Rico Dowdle pop off. Of course, we know that. This is just not the same rushing ecosystem. And I would say that if there's one, again, they've been terrible in the run game, but if there's one thing this team can do from a defensive perspective, they're kind of middle of the pack in terms of pressure rate. They do have some guys that can get after the passer, which is going to be problematic behind this offensive line. Because to me, I think like the Chargers should just lean back really heavy into that passing game because of the running back situation right now. But God, can they protect? Can they hold up? That actually does bring me back to the Nyheim Hines thing. If they were just going to go full, and look, Nyheim Hines has not played a ton of football. He's had a lot of injuries, of course, of late. But if they were just going to go heavy into the passing game, why would they not just put the veteran guy out there that has a history of being a real deal receiving option? Like I said, I know it's a long shot. He's on the practice squad. We have not seen Nyheim Hines play a lot of football lately. But that's when they signed him to the practice squad. He doesn't get mentioned in any of these fantasy conversations. And I just thought to myself, if they were going to go back to that pass heavy style of attack, you'd imagine that's the type of back they'd be chasing.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about like these opportunities that pop up for backups, like true backups, like third string type guys, we did a really good job with the Cardinals one identifying that it was going to be Michael Carter, and yet he did that in a very, very easy matchup. So maybe we get that here, but I've also been telling everyone about Michael Carter and the Cardinals backfield that like I'm not sure I trust him moving forward. I think it was like a really easy matchup and he took advantage of that
Yeah.
one, and now moving forward, the matchups are going to get harder, and he's not the kind of talent that's going to be able to do much with that, in my opinion. With these guys, I think we're talking about guys who are potentially even like lesser talents than that. So they have an easy matchup. If it's going to get split three ways, you're basically just hoping that one of them falls into the end zone. I think that's the way that either of these guys is going to pay off for you in fantasy. And that is not a great approach to necessarily take unless, again, you are very, very desperate. And then in the passing game, like we've talked about the receivers so much, and we don't need to bring up the pen meter, the Lad McConkey pen meter. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, on Monday's show when we go over the panic meter and assess where you're at with that each week. But yeah, the Dolphins, the way to beat them is on the ground. They're a little bit better through the air. So I think they're going to need to try, and I'm just not confident that they're going to be able to do it behind a completely banged up offensive line that in some spots, what are we down to, like the fourth, fifth stringers at this point? Like it's a bad situation for an offense that has so much talent.
Yeah, we're going to have to get into a lot of quick game if we're the Chargers, and like the Greg Roman quick game, not so great. It's these longer developing routes that's been really good for this team the last couple of years. Not as much the quick stuff, but we'll see. We could definitely see a lot of quick hitters to Quentin Johnson, to Keenan Allen, and maybe, God willing, to Lad McConkey, but we shall see. All right, let's get to the next question here for week 6.
Well, we're going to stick with teams that have a lot of injuries. And is the Lions injured secondary up for this matchup with Patrick Mahomes? And this is kind of quiet. I don't know if everybody's like noticed how many injuries the Lions are racking up in that secondary, but just taking a beating, right? Again, I know it's so reminiscent of last year when they came out, the defense looked all right. And then the injuries crushed them across the board, and they were not the same defense. And they became a unit to absolutely target as the year went along. And Dan Campbell's already come out and said that Terrion Arnold, that DJ Reed, and that Khalil Dorsey are going to be out indefinitely. Reed went on IR last week. Arnold, Dorsey, they're going to be out, quote, a while, according to Campbell. The team also lost another corner in Ennis Rakestraw. That was back in August. So they are down so many guys in that secondary. And what a time to be going to Kansas City to take on Patrick Mahomes, who has been playing very well this year, like a rejuvenated Mahomes. I talked about this on Fantasy Football Live on Sunday, that from a fantasy lens, like the last 2 seasons, the numbers were down, right? He was more of like a low end QB1, QB12 one year, QB13 another. This year, without Rashee Rice, with Worthy only out there for a couple of games, he's the QB3 in fantasy points per game. And not just the QB3, he is right up there, like scoring as many points per game as Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Like that's where we remembered him a few years ago. He still got it, right? He might have the dad bod now. He can still produce. He's running more with which is huge. He's finding ways to get it done with whoever is out there. And Xavier Worthy did miss practice on Thursday, so we're going to have to, again, be on Xavier Worthy watch to see if he's going to play this week. We'll keep our eyes on that. I'm hoping it's just a maintenance day because he's had multiple injuries. I think it's the ankle and the shoulder for him. So hopefully it's just a maintenance day and he'll be out there this week. But I don't know that even if Worthy misses this game, I don't know that the Lions secondary is equipped to slow down Mahomes because they have so many injuries. They are absolutely just a target to go after in fantasy right now.
Yeah, and even though they've had these injuries, they're still one of the more man coverage heavy teams in the NFL. They're 5th in terms of man coverage so far on the season. They have dropped back a little bit as they've gotten some of these injuries, which is what we said with the Commanders. Like that does happen. These teams want to lean into a lot of man when they start to get banged up. They don't want to get these like backup guys just completely fried, but nevertheless, they're still 8th last week in terms of man coverage. And that was obviously against Jake Browning. And they kind of maybe backed off the man coverage because they were winning that game. So I still think there's a chance they'll line up in a lot of man coverage. And of course, like, yeah, if Xavier Worthy's out there, he made some big plays against man coverage in the Ravens game, particularly his first game back. But even more importantly, we know this is what happens when you get man coverage. The quarterback can scramble, and nobody's been more willing to take off this year than Patrick Mahomes. So whatever the rushing prop is for Mahomes, I feel like we could be seeing another over here on that one.
Well, and this is a game with the highest projected point total of the week, right? 52.5. And it's not going to be, as we've said, Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. I don't think racking up huge yardage in this one. The Lions are pretty good against the run.
No.
It's going to be Mahomes getting it done, whether it's with his legs or whether it's through the air. And it's probably going to be both. And then next week, Rashee Rice comes back, right? So I'm looking at Mahomes as a top 3 play this week. I think it's a great matchup for him. And I think he really seems to be like a matchup-proof top 5 fantasy quarterback the rest of the way. And I think it's only going to get better here as Rice returns, as Worthy eventually gets completely healthy. We have not seen the best from this Chiefs offense. It is only going to get better. And then on the other side, I mean, I think it's kind of a bad spot for Goff. You know, going to KC, it's notoriously been a tough place for quarterbacks to go and produce there. And you know, again, this is another one I think we've been all over with him. We talked before the season about he was going to have more outdoor games, more road games to start the year, and he hasn't been great in those other than the game when he went on the road to Cincy and got to take advantage of that Bengals defense, had a fine performance there. This week, I am not feeling the same about him. And that makes the Lions pass catchers way more volatile, right? We talked about Jameson Williams on the Panic Meter show on Monday, that when you get into these matchups where they're not at home, they're not on the fast track, it becomes a lot more difficult, I think, for a guy like Jameson Williams to produce, to get those opportunities, because he's not getting major volume right now in this offense. So I think he's somebody you worry about. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to play those guys, but it's the lesser guys, the secondary guys in that offense, like the David Montgomerys, like J-Mo and others and Sam Laporta, who are going to have a hard time producing when they're on the road and when they struggle a little more, which I think Goff is probably going to do in this game.
All right, let's get to your final question for the week, which is a good one because it involves your Buffalo Bills.
I'm taking a negative outlook on this one, but you could tell me if I'm going too far with it. Can the Falcons hand the Bills their second straight loss? And, you know I'm saying that as a Bills fan, and I'm not an overly emotional Bills fan, despite the fact that, of course, I have the Bills helmet and the Flutie Flakes and everything behind me. But I'm not the kind of guy who, wears my heart on my sleeve when it comes to the Bills at all. I'm very pragmatic, but I don't think this is a walk in the park for Buffalo, right? You come off this tough divisional loss to a team that I think they should have beat on Sunday night. Now you're going on the road to Atlanta for Monday Night Football against an opponent that's coming off their bye week. So they've been resting up. They've been preparing extra for this one. And the Falcons have a very strong backfield. We know that. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. They can attack that weakness for Buffalo because the Bills are giving up the 4th most rushing yards, to give up the 4th most rushing touchdowns this season. It would be a huge boost if Ed Oliver can get back out there. They haven't had him since the opener, and he is back at practice in a limited fashion right now. So fingers crossed he can get out there and improve this Bills defense, especially against the run. But they don't have anybody who's going to slow down Drake London. I don't think they're going to have an answer for the run game. The Falcons defense, I think, is also underrated. You have some of the rookies really producing for them this year. So their defense has actually been a little better than expected, other than that Panthers game. I still don't know what happened in that Panthers game when they just got totally, rolled in that one. But other than that, the defenses looked all right, but they're getting some real contributions from those rookies. I think that's going to happen again here, even though it is prime time and they're going to be under the lights. And I think they can do enough to stay in this game and potentially give the Bills their second straight loss. Am I being crazy about that, Harmon?
I think that's a little aggressive. God, we have a double header Monday night, this one, and then the Commanders and Bears. So we'll try to be dialed in to both of them. What's the timing on that? Yeah, they're going to be together. Okay, we'll be dialed in on that. I know Boone will be dialed in on that's for sure. Maybe you can give a curse to your boy Dalton Kincaid coming in this one, and he can maybe actually play a bunch of snaps. We'll see, but
I'll work on that for Monday.
I will say you workshop that one. Whether you want to curse Pitts or Kincaid in that one, not that interesting with Zach Ertz or one of these, or Cole Kmet. So yeah, you definitely workshop on the Pitts Kincaid thing. But in terms of the matchup here with Falcons offense, Bills defense, it is interesting. I do think there's two advantages that the Falcons have. You mentioned the run game, no question about that. They're still top 10. Of course they are, just under 5 yards per carry on zone runs so far this year are the Atlanta Falcons, because that's just what they do. They've mixed in a little bit more gap stuff this year than last, but they're still primarily a zone team. They're such a good rushing offense. Obviously, Bijan Robinson's awesome. Tyler Algier is really good too. The other thing, though, is so much zone coverage on the back end from the Buffalo Bills. That's the Sean McDermott staple. And Drake London has been very productive against zone coverage this year. Not as much against man coverage, which I think is more of a Michael Penix thing than a Drake London thing. But nevertheless, has been really productive. That could be yet another advantage. If you think about what I said with Washington, where they struggle to defend in zone coverage, we just saw them cook Washington before the bye, the Atlanta Falcons. We could definitely see some translatableness over here in this one. So I'm not with you that I think that this could be – I still would say the Bills are going to win this game. They should win this game. But I can see how the Falcons offense can get more involved in this game than maybe people think.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting I think it's going to be a little closer than people think, like you're saying there. I'm also wondering, like, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen for Keon Coleman or Khalil Shakir in terms of them being like, really strong fantasy options this year. And it's still early in the season, but you can start them as like, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 flex options, but you just don't feel that excited about it. And, if Shakir finds the end zone, he'll have an okay week. The same could be said for Coleman, but yeah, the Bills are continuing to spread the ball around. Kincaid has taken on a bigger role this year, not in terms of his usage, but in terms of the production. He's coming through in that offense. He's been pretty good for fantasy. And I think that's just another one that I'll take the L on that I thought we had a chance for Keon Coleman to really emerge. And I don't see anything different happening for him in this game. I would love to see the Bills go out and make a trade, not like they did last year to get a guy like Amari Cooper, but maybe go out and get a Chris Olave or a DJ Moore or somebody that can give them a little bit of something in this offense in the passing attack. And then the other thing for this game, Darnell Mooney not practicing coming off the bye. That's kind of discouraging because when he got hurt in the game before the bye, they really downplayed it. And maybe it's just a maintenance day. They're giving them a little extra time, but normally when you have that extra week and you come back and you're not practicing coming off the bye, it's a pretty bad sign for your chances of playing in that game.
Yeah, just on the Bills pass catcher point, the DJ Moore trade is a little interesting. I don't know if this team would do it after they whiffed so hard with the Amari Cooper thing last year, but there has been a very back and forth relationship with these guys, the Bills, and then the Carolina Panthers, because Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, they came from Carolina. So there's been a pretty big pipeline for former Panthers to find themselves in Buffalo, on both sides of the ball. Shaq Thompson, former Panthers linebacker, is currently playing for this team. Kelvin Benjamin, former Carolina Panthers. The list goes on and on. So obviously DJ Moore started his career in Carolina. So there's a chance that could happen. Although those guys were not there for that. But nevertheless, because McDermott and those guys got there before DJ Moore was drafted. But nevertheless, just something to consider on that one. And then lastly, just on the Dalton Kincaid thing, it kind of was to me either or. Like one of those guys had to break out, Coleman or Kincaid. And Kincaid, to his credit, we'll see if the fantasy scoring can keep up. Ray Garvin and I talked about this, but he has really broken out. Like he's been effective as a downfield receiver. So I would like to see more of him. It's just the limitations of the blocking and all of the things that they need from the tight ends there that he doesn't really give them. So I do want to give a shout out to Kincaid that I think what you were saying, like one of these guys is going to break out. And one of them did. We just need to see more from Coleman, who was apparently benched in the first quarter because of disciplinary reasons. So that's like he's got to get with the program here, which is kind of the message that they're telling us. So we'll see what happens on that one. But all right, we're going to take our next break. When we come back, we have literally no one's games of the week to talk about. We will get into that right after this break. All right, we are back. It is time. Let's get into literally no one's games of the week. Yeah, that's right. Stretch it out, yawn it out, because these are some snoozers. Okay, we have some snoozers here in this week's segment of literally no one's games of the week. Although I will say the first one, which is Patriots at Saints, I mean this is pretty exciting, right? We got the Patriots, Boone. Shout out to Scott Pianowski.
So. I think there's something to be said for all these games this week. So props to you. I think we found some good ones to talk about this week. I will not make fun of you for any of these choices.
All right, well, save that energy for when we get to the third one, because that was the one that I even felt a little gross for putting on the outline. But yeah, Patriots at Saints. Shout out to Scott Pianowski, who all of his takes about the Patriots that I was laughing at him, but more like laughing at how much of a homer he was being. But also I did not. I was like, brother, if they get 8 wins, that would be a freaking miracle. This team looks like it's going to win a lot more than 8 games on the back of Drake May and Stephon Diggs and their connection. They're going into New Orleans. I think they can put a pretty good offensive game plan together there. Of course, like Drake May, fantasy starter, Stephon Diggs, fantasy starter. We're still constantly trying to figure out clues with the run game. And then the Saints scam lives on, Boone. Chris Olave, when you pull up just any usage chart, it's outrageous the amount of volume he's getting to the relative lack of production. The Patriots, there's an injury situation with Christian Gonzalez again, who's been a little limited in practice. That is definitely going to make a difference. So we'll see what happens on that front. But otherwise, this is still a passing game we like from a fantasy standpoint. Spencer Rattler's playing good football, in my opinion. So I think this is a pretty interesting. This game definitely, I think, could get pretty interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you hit on something really, really good there, which was the Olave thing, right? Like averaging 10.8 targets per game. That is second behind only Puka Nacua this year. And yet the wide receiver 34 in fantasy points per game and has not topped 60 yards in any game this year and has not found the end zone, which is just awful. But you chase that volume normally, especially when it's a guy who we know has the talent, who we've seen produce big games before. You follow that volume, it's going to come through. And yes, the Christian Gonzalez thing is interesting because it's hamstring. That's what kept him out earlier going back to the summer. That is kind of scary. You hope for the best. You hope he's going to be out there, a very talented corner, a guy who really changes the way that offenses can play. If he misses this game, then yeah, Olave's going way up the ranks here. And I think this is one where that breakout is going to come. That big game is going to come for him at some point. Because you go back, I mean, this is a top 25 fantasy receiver in 2022 and 2023. And then he had injuries last year, right? So we're not that far removed from him being somebody that you feel good about putting in your lineup week in and week out. And yet this year, it just hasn't really come to fruition yet. So yeah, I think he's a great one here. And there's a reason why I mentioned him as somebody that I would love to see the Bills go trade for, because we had the Saints beat writers out there suggesting that they might be looking to deal some veterans at some point here. And everyone thought about Alvin Kamara right away. Alvin Kamara, who now is dealing with an ankle injury. I didn't see if he practiced today or not, but he was limited yesterday with a new ankle injury. And regardless of whether he's able to play or not, regardless of whether he's limited in this game in any way, we've already seen Kendre Miller coming on in that backfield, turning it into a lot closer of a split than we thought it would be before the season, and maybe even headed towards taking over that backfield at some point. But Kamara is a guy that the beat writers have also kind of pushed back on, suggesting that it doesn't seem like he's going to be one of these veterans that are traded. So then you wonder who's it going to be. But regardless, for this game, yeah, you're looking at Kendre Miller as a potential flex play. We'll follow the Kamara thing. If he's out there, he's an RB3 flex play. And I think Olave, even if Christian Gonzalez is out there, I think you're still looking at him as a high-end wide receiver 3 who has some upside, because one of these weeks it's going to hit, Harmon, for him.
No question. One of these weeks he's going to get more than 60 yards receiving, which I don't believe has happened yet this season. And the usage is so good. Like, not just the targets and stuff, like it's the way they are using him. They're really weaponizing motion to get him on over the middle routes, but him and Spencer Rattler just haven't quite connected. You know, Olave's good. I'm like not the toughest dude going over the middle. Of like, he has taken a lot of hits as well over the course of his career, so maybe we don't want to send him over the middle too much. But those, like, and I don't mean to say he's not tough, but I just mean in terms of like the physicality in his game, like a Puka Nacua, is not quite there. That's not really his specialty, more of a speed guy. But God, he's open. No question on those plays. He is open. And if him and Rattler can connect on some of those, there could be a big game here, especially if there is no Gonzalez. But I'm with you that even with the way they move him around, the motion and stuff, he could get free even if there is Christian Gonzalez. So I'm watching that for sure. On the Patriots side of things, I think Diggs is, to me, top 20 rest of season wide receiver. I think he's locked in there. And, you know, The backfield continues to be a journey. There's even some talk that like, they might get another guy in the mix there, in addition to what they're with Travion Henderson or Ramondre Stevenson. So Travion at some point just has to like play better and seize the job, which just hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. So it's kind of, I do kind of feel like the ball is in his court. I know everybody's blaming the coaching staff, but I kind of feel as if the ball is in his court. So if any moment he can go out there and just rip a big one, that might really move the needle here. So that's just more of a, you can't play him. You can't really drop him. He's just kind of there. So that's just a storyline to watch in this one for sure. But let's go to the next game here, which is, I feel like I keep putting these international games into this segment, which I don't know what that says about the league's initiative to grow the game, but don't worry, the numbers will be good. The attendance will be good. It doesn't really matter. Broncos at Jets. Like I said, this is an international game here. This one does set up really well, though. One point I made with Ray earlier this week, Boone, is, as I said earlier, Justin Fields is I don't know what your numbers are against man coverage, but Justin Fields' numbers against man coverage are some of the best in the league. Garrett Wilson, obviously one of the best route runners against man coverage out there. We talked about Mason Taylor. Even though it's a tough defensive matchup, I can see, maybe it's garbage time, I don't know, but I can see some good moments here for the Jets passing game. Am I being ridiculous when I say that?
No, and it's just because, like, Pat Surtain's not going to stick on him all game. He's going to have opportunities, of course, and he'll hit on some of those, even if it is just in garbage time like we've been seeing in previous weeks. And going back to what I said earlier, I think this is a spot where Mason Taylor could really come on with the attention that defense is definitely going to give to Garrett Wilson. I think this is going to be a solid Mason Taylor game. And then on the other side, it's like kind of a similar thing where like Cortland Sutton's going to have to go against Sauce Gardner. So then who's the next man up? This could be a spot where Troy Franklin or Marvin Mims come through, because we've seen number 2 receivers do pretty well in this matchup against the Jets. So who's it going to be? Is it going to be just kind of spinning the dial, and could it be Franklin or could it be Mims? Or like I said, I think there's a chance we see both these guys hit on some big plays.
Well, it only takes one play, of course. So, and Mims is a guy that obviously he can make it happen in the week, or in one play, excuse me. But Troy Franklin's been hanging on to that second receiver job. 79% of the routes in last week's game. He's been clearly the number 2, around 80% all season. Pat Bryant actually ran more routes than Marvin Mims last week. If you missed it, I understand, because he got 0 targets. A bunch of dudes got the football in that Broncos game against the Eagles. Pat Bryant was out there, didn't get any footballs thrown his way, but that's at least somebody to track as him as kind of that. He was about 47% out wide, 47% in the slot. So they want to move him around, kind of use him as that big slot player. But I would imagine that, yeah, if somebody's going to do the Ryan Flournoy impression, it would be Troy Franklin, where he's that number 2 receiver, moves around the formation. He gets a lot of screens as well. So that's definitely one that if you need a desperation wide receiver play, Troy Franklin would be my pick here.
I feel like someone at home is playing like bingo watching this and mentioning Ryan Flournoy was on that bingo card. So shout out to them for hitting that. The Ryan Flournoy mention had to happen at some point. I
didn't want to do it for obvious reasons. The obvious reasons being the person who produces this show, but nevertheless, I did do it. So I'm a man of integrity, really. That's what the takeaway should be from that one. I'm also a man of filth, muck, mire, because that is what this third game is here that I've added to the slate, which is Titans at Raiders. I'll be honest, I felt a little queasy putting this one on here, but you said there's even some interest in this in terms of a literally no one's games of the week, and I can't imagine this anyone's game of the week. So what intrigues you? I know what intrigued me enough to put it on here, but what intrigues you about this game?
I mean, we got to talk about the Brock Bowers situation, right? Like, he puts up the huge game in week 1, then he gets hurt and, tries to play through it. And they finally decided they're going to sit him down. It doesn't seem like he's going to play this week. So I don't understand why more people aren't talking about Michael Mayer, who was also hurt, but looks like he's going to come back for this game. I think he's a really sneaky fantasy streamer for this one, because he could step into that role. They talked going back to before the season about how they felt like they had 2 number 1 tight ends and how much they like him. I think he could step right in and have a pretty decent game here. On top of the fact that, as bad as Jacoby Myers has been in terms of his production in the last few weeks, this is a pretty good matchup for him. This is a spot where he could definitely bounce back. The Titans have given up some decent days to receivers this year, fantasy-wise, so I think he could have a pretty good game, and he's a guy that people are probably going to feel like they should send to their bench because this offense hasn't really been clicking, and they haven't really been finding him in the last few weeks for big days, and yet this is a spot where I think that could happen. And then on the other side, Tony Pollard is somebody that I think people need to be moving off of as quick as they possibly can. And I know you're probably not going to get a huge return for him, but the team is talking up Tajay Spears as somebody that they want to get more involved. And, Pollard's he's been solid, but like unspectacular this season. And props to him for just producing like decent yardage in an offense that has struggled more weeks than not, let's face it. But, from week 7 on coming up, he's going to have to take on the Patriots, the Colts, the Chargers, then have a bye, then play against the Texans. All 4 of those opponents are top 10 in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs. That is not a good stretch. Even after that, it doesn't get much easier. He's got the Seahawks, the Jags, the Browns, the 49ers, and the Chiefs through week 16. So you want to get off this Pollard ride immediately. Sell him for what you can. He's an RB3 that needs to find the end zone to pay off for you in a given week. That's not really somebody you feel great about putting in your lineup. So try to package him with someone else. He's got some name value. Move off of him and find somebody who's going to actually help you win some games and win a title this year.
I will say, just speaking of selling him off, I wonder if he's a trade candidate for this team. Tajay Spears younger on a rookie contract. This is a team that's going nowhere. Obviously, he's on a bigger deal. I think he's probably not likely with the team next year. Is this a guy that the Bears call about? Is this a guy that the Chiefs call about? Something like that. I could see that, which obviously that would be huge for his fantasy value. But I agree with you with what's happening here with the Titans. I agree. He's a guy to just move on from. Too low of a ceiling. Definitely interested to see if Calvin Ridley can get himself out of the coping corner with another game. He played really well on Sunday, and maybe this is just what he does, just plays poorly to start the year, and it's like, all right, lock in. Okay, I'm in. Or it's week 5, it's week 6. I'm ready to go now because this is pretty much exactly what happened last year to him. So that's obviously something we're tracking, and this is a good matchup for him. Like I said last week, somebody dropped Calvin Ridley in one of my leagues. I picked him up. I didn't start him last week. I would have won if I had started him, which that's a crazy thing to say. But yeah, I probably am going to end up starting him this week just because we start like 4 wide receivers in this league, and he's going to get the nod. So we'll see. You can all yeah, he's in the coping corner, and I'm starting him. So that's how I feel about this situation here. But to go back to the Raiders, because I'm interested in Cam Ward, but nobody's playing Cam Ward in fantasy. But it's interesting to kind of track and see what he does and some of the younger Titans there. But on the Raiders side of things, obviously it's a great matchup for Ashton Genty, but you mentioned it's a good matchup for the passing game too. Yeah, if Michael Mayer gets the start here, that would be really interesting because even last week, Albert Okui-Bunam got promoted to the active roster and got 6 targets. Like I didn't even know I didn't even know he was like going to get major playing time. Runs a route on 59% of the dropbacks, gets 6 targets. Ian Thomas, their blocking tight end, ran 14 routes and got 3 targets. So they will use the tight end. This offense is going to use the tight end. The other thing I would note about this passing game, and I'm not going to do a big rant here because I never do like big team is making a mistake rants because usually I'm trying to be generous here, but I did let one rip on the Raiders because they played Jack Besh finally last week, and I thought he looked great. And I was like, these guys were making a big mistake, like galaxy braining their offense for speed, and they finally get him on the field. Didn't do anything crazy in box score. Obviously, Geno Smith, you're not doing anything crazy in the box score. Geno Smith is your quarterback right now, the way he's playing, but just something to track for Dynasty Bros. I really like Jack Besh as a prospect. I actually think he would help this offense, so I'd like to see him continue to get some playing time.
And it seems like it's going to take a little bit of time for Bowers to get right. And I hope they don't bring him back early. I hope they bring him back once he is closer to 100% healthy. And in the meantime, they need guys to step up. And yeah, Jack Besh would be someone who could certainly do that. So yeah, the Deontay Thornton thing doesn't seem like it really amounted to much. Let's get Besh out there. Let's see what else this offense could do. But also, like, I don't know if it's like Geno needs to get more comfortable in this system, but like he has not played great this season. No. So I'm hoping that at some point he turns a corner here as well, because he's not a bad quarterback. And yet it could be the offensive line issues, and some of those guys are getting healthier now. But yeah, he has not played well this season. And for this whole thing to work, he needs to be a much better quarterback than he's been. And he showed us in the past that he can be. We talked about him before the season and what he's done in the past. So yeah, let's hope he eventually finds his footing in Vegas and can start to deliver. And this would be a matchup where he could potentially do that.
Yeah, definitely the right matchup for it. In Las Vegas as well. He's 35 years old. I know nobody thinks that's old for quarterbacks anymore, but if you lose like a little bit of your athleticism, you lose a little bit of torque on the arm, and he was already kind of a really aggressive quarterback, you start writing checks that your arm can't cash anymore, and you got to kind of change your game. So this is definitely something to track because it's not gone well, obviously, for Geno so far. But this show is going great, but we are going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, it's time for the Hurry Up Offense for Week 6. We'll get into that right after this break. All right, we are back. It's time to get into the Hurry Up Offense. This is where we go rapid fire through the rest of the show, forcing the other to answer questions, to respond to bold predictions in 40 seconds or less. Of course, unless one of us pulls the challenge flag. You guys have been listening to the show. You know how this goes. Welcome to the Hurry Up Offense. All right, Boone. As always, you get to go first. Give us your first give me your first question here in the Hurry Up Offense.
I feel like based on the way the show has gone, we've given you a lot of potential options you could bring up here, but which player would you most like to see traded before the deadline in order to boost their fantasy stock? And I mean, there's Alvin Kamara that we mentioned. Tony Pollard got brought up. DJ Moore, Chris Olave, Breece Hall, somebody else that I've seen out there in rumors. Who would it be for you?
Breece Hall is definitely interesting. I will go with DJ Moore, though, just because I want a little bit better for my guy DJ. You know, I don't have any DJ Moore fantasy teams, so this is purely just I think he could help some teams' offense, and I think the Bears have moved on. Like, they haven't moved on physically yet, but they've spiritually moved on from DJ Moore. They've got Luther Burden waiting in the wings, very similar skill set. So I think there's a lot of teams that he could help, even if I know they're playing tonight. We're recording this on Thursday, but like the Giants, he could do, I don't know if he'd want to play with Jackson Dart, like do the rookie quarterback thing again, but he could do the Mickey Mouse RPO stuff with Jackson Dart and have a nice year before going to get another payday. All right, my first question here. Give the people your rankings for Bengals players this week, because I know this is a big talking point with Flacco starting.
Oh, man, I don't have it off the top of my head here. Jamar Chase is a mid-range wide receiver 1. I think I have him around wide receiver 6. T. Higgins, we're not like totally factoring this in yet because it is a tough matchup and it's Flacco's first game, and we're not going to see the best possible version of what this could be. But T. Higgins is like a high-end wide receiver 3. He gets a bump up. And Chase Brown, I think, is going to get a lot of dump offs. So we're moving him back into that like borderline low end RB2 range. But I am much more excited about this offense for obvious reasons with Flacco there now. We've seen him chuck it all over the yard. He's going to get an opportunity to do that. But man, this first game against the Packers is going to be a tough one.
All right, back to you.
Other than Trey McBride, I'm not going to let you do the easy one. Other than Trey McBride, if you could have any tight end on your fantasy roster the rest of the season, who would it be?
I mean, Trey McBride. Why would I want Trey McBride when I could have Jake Ferguson?
Okay.
The Ferg daddy himself, bro. He leads tight ends with he's like 40 catches. Nobody else even has 30. And I don't see how this
CeeDee
is
Lamb is coming back soon. Let's remember that. CeeDee Lamb is going to be back taking a lot of volume away. Come on.
He was still balling out. You didn't throw the challenge flag, pal. You don't get to just interrupt me with my 40 seconds. Listen, yeah, CeeDee Lamb is coming back. BFD, this offense is still going to be good. Brian Schottenheimer's cooking. He was having big games with CeeDee Lamb. So, yeah, Trey McBride. Give me Jake Ferguson, though, for the answer.
I think Tyler Warren was the right answer there. But, all right, I'll let you go with Jake Ferguson there. Hit me up. What do you got next?
Sure, whatever. All right. The Steelers rarely get mentioned in these preview shows. They're coming off a bye. We talked about every other team coming off a bye except the Steelers. Say something about the Steelers in 40 seconds.
Jalen Warren is going to catch a ton of passes. He's coming back this week, which is great to see, and he has established himself as the clear guy. I know everyone thinks Kenneth Gainwell had that huge game and might eat into his workload, but I think as long as Jalen Warren is healthy, this is going to be Jaylen Warren's backfield. The matchup is tough against the Browns, but because he catches so many passes, he's almost matchup proof. So he's going to have a fine game this week. He's definitely somebody that I think you can play with confidence moving forward in an offense that doesn't have too many guys like that. So you're going to play him, and then you're going to play DK Metcalf as like a fringe low-end wide receiver too.
All right, I'll take it.
Who is the best wide receiver who's the clear number 2 on his own depth chart? So some options, and you could pick from anyone you want, but some options that come to mind: Devontae Adams, George Pickens, T. Higgins, who I just talked about, Devontae Smith, who plays tonight in the Thursday night game, or maybe somebody else that you like better.
Yeah, okay. Devontae Adams is the right answer, but I feel like he is the cheating answer because he is like a former elite wide receiver. He's also getting targeted like a number 1. It's just the fact that Puka's getting targeted like no other human being on earth. So he's kind of the cheating answer. The other correct answer, though, is Devontae Smith. And based on the way that and I know the game is tonight. God, I hope I'm not jinxing Devontae Smith, but based on the way they've played so far, he's played better football in the year 2025 than the wide receiver 1 on his team in AJ Brown. So
hopefully I haven't infected you with that primetime curse ability. Yeah.
If we do, if you have, we're gonna fight in the streets. That's for sure. I'll be coming up there to Canada myself, and we're gonna fight this out. All right, my next question for you. Speaking of fighting, is this another fireworks fest between Baker Mayfield and a fellow round 1 revival quarterback in Mac Jones this week?
I don't know that the 49ers have the weaponry. We'll see if Juwan Jennings can play. I know he was out there in a limited fashion in today's practice. He's dealing with a couple injuries. If he can get out there, I would get a little more on board with it, but the 49ers are just playing so shorthanded right now. Kendrick Bourne had a huge game, and yet, I mean, other than that, like Christian McCaffrey's going to do his thing. Jake Tongas, are we really like that into Jake Tongas? Like, I just don't think they have enough weapons right now to maybe match what the Buccaneers can do, so not as excited, but man, pretty soon, Kittle's coming back. We're going to see Ricky Pearsall back eventually. Like, this offense is going to be very, very exciting. We just need to get some guys healthy. All right. In a Space Jam scenario where you had to pick one player at each position to represent humanity, who would you pick at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end? You have 40 seconds, sir.
I can do this faster than that. Quarterback is easily your boy Josh Allen. Running back, I'm taking Bijan Robinson. Wide receiver, I'm taking Puka Nacua right now. I mean, he's going to be tougher than all those little dorky aliens or whatever. Give me a break. Yeah, Puka Nacua versus aliens, 100%. And at tight end, I'm taking George Kittle. A healthy George Kittle. I'll take a healthy George Kittle because he's insane enough as a human being. Although he might be friends with the aliens. I don't know. But I think healthy George Kittle is the correct answer.
We'll pour one out, too, for Derrick Henry, who I think used to be the answer to the running back version of that, and it's no longer the case. So, yeah, sorry about you, Derrick Henry.
All right, my last one here. Are we really about to get a Jacoby Brissett start in the year of our Lord 2025? And is this good news for Marvin Harrison Jr. because Jacoby Brissett can see over the offensive line?
So when I do my Thursday rankings, I have like individual rankings pages in one version of them, and I put some bullet points at the top, and I had to talk about the Kyler Murray injury because it's possible that he sits out. And I had to kind of like pull back. I was initially writing exactly that, Harmon. I was writing like, and this might be a good thing for the passing game. I kind of think there's a chance. Like, Jacoby Brissett is older, and in more recent starts, I know he had some good spot starts in the past, but more recently, the production that he's had when he's gotten out there has not been great. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be a good thing, but he's a competent backup. I think he'll at least be able to make that offense move. So yeah, not an upgrade, but not that far off, let's say, in the passing attack. If football didn't exist.
All right, that was our time.
Oh, we're out of time.
We got to get it.
All right,
that was
I'll
our
save
last
that
one.
one for next week.
Yes. Well, God, if football doesn't exist, I'm scared about that. Yeah, I need a whole week to prepare for whatever
it's a good teaser for next week.
About to say. Perfect. All right. 12th in EPA per dropback, by the way, in this offensive system. Jacoby Brissett back in 2022. I just want to say that. It's probably going to go poorly. Yeah, this is going to be terrible. Anyways, all right, that's going to do it for today's show. Hell of a show. Hell of a Week 6 preview by you, Justin Boone. You will be back for this show on the People's Panic Meter on Monday, but make sure you watch us both on Fantasy Football Live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, right here on this very YouTube channel. It's going to be a great show. We will see you all there. For those of you that have specific questions, remember that John Daigle does a live Q&A on this YouTube channel, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, so make sure you dial into that for all of your start-sit needs. As for this show, we're going to be back with the Sunday recap. Chris Allen and I will be going live right as the late game window ends. So that's right, Niners, Bucks, the Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield Firefest hits 000. Dial it into this channel right here on YouTube. Until then, we are out.